Hi and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Nyambura and this is 100 on Books new setup. Um, so today I'm going to do my first Maktaba Manenos installment. I know, you've been waiting. So here we are. I am going to do it, as I said, with ebooks first, and then within ebooks first, then audiobooks, and then within those two categories, the books that have cues, and then the books that I could renew them for the rest of time because I have been known to do that. So let's get into it. Top of the list, which is to say books that have cues. There's one book where 5 people are waiting, which means it needs to be read because otherwise I will not see it for some time. And that's Pure Color by Sheila Heti, which I think I first heard of from CJ or Jalen. I'll post their channels below. Then, with one person waiting a piece, My Begging Chat by Sheila Roberts, Refuse to Be Done, How to Write and Rewrite a Novel in 3 Drafts by Matt Bell. If I'm looking to the side, it's because I'm looking at my notes. High Risk Homosexual by Edgar Gomez, and Those Bones Are Not My Child by Tony Kate Bambara. And I think of those 4, I heard of them from Twitter or from lists, which honestly, I add a lot of books at the library because of lists. And then these are the books which I could keep renewing for the rest of the time, as I said. True Story, What Reality TV Says About Us by Danielle J. Lindemann, which I first heard about from Deboki. I'll put a link to the video where she talks about it. I Will Judge You by Your Bookshelf by Grant Snyder, a random library find. I somehow managed to still roam the stacks at the library. And then This Golden State by Marit Weisenberg, which I first heard of from Rincy over at Rincy Reads. I'll also post a link to that video. Outlawed by Anna North. I'd been seeing it around, but my friend Wairimu Moreithi convinced me basically to pick it up. The Art of Rest, How to Find Respite in the Modern Age by Claudia Hammond. I love Claudia Hammond on the BBC actually. So when I was told about this book by a friend of mine called Ivy Nyeka, I was like, okay, I'm with it. And then also because I had put out a newsletter entry about rest and how I was struggling to rest and so on, I'll put a link to said newsletter entry downstairs. And yeah, so this was an interesting find on multiple levels. Moms by Yongxing Ma and translated by Janet Hong. This is a comic I've been wanting to read for a long time. If there's noise in the background, it's because I live in a society where construction is a real thing. I'll see if I can find an essay that Aisha Ali wrote in Popular where she talked about how Nairobi is just a construction site, to be honest. But yeah, so Moms, it's a comic I'd been wanting to read for a while. It's based in South Korea, and I like that it foregrounds older women. And I borrowed it on Scribd at some point, but then I never did quite get around to it. And also for some reason, Scribd didn't seem to render comic books really well for me. So I'm really happy that I can read it now on Libby, because Libby renders comic books way better than Scribd in my experience. And also I literally bought a tab just to read comic books. Shout out to a person whose name I'm not going to mention but whose initials are AK for getting me back on the comic reading train last year. Like, thanks wherever you are. Then the next is Woman Running in the Mountains by Yuko Tsushima, translated by Geraldine Harcourt. I'm pretty sure this was brought on my radar by Sean over at Sean the Book Maniac. Then Sex and the Single Woman, 24 Writers Reimagine Helen Gurley Brown's cult classic, edited by Eliza Smith and Haley Swanson, which, if you recall from my media big book freakout tag, was an anticipated book. The other is Brickmakers by Salva Almada, translated by Annie McDermott. I read this earlier this year. In case you follow me over on Goodreads, I'll put a link downstairs. But I'm rereading it for a prize, for the BookTube prize, which I will talk about sometime next month, I imagine. Then My Heart by Semesdin Mehmedinovic, translated by Celia Hawksworth and introduced by Alexander Hemon, which I'm also reading for the BookTube prize. When Stars Are Scattered by Victoria Nison and Omar Mohammed, which I found about through an NPR list. Yes, the NPR list. But also it intrigued me because it's set partly in Kenya and uniquely features a child refugee. So that was interesting to me on multiple levels. Then lastly in this category, Sassy by Madeline Miller. I know this book was hot on the internet, especially like the bookish YouTubes, the bookish Instagrams and so on at some point, and I just did not get on it. And then today I was talking to a friend of mine at work, a work friend. Yes, a work friend. I'm going to post the clip from Abbott Elementary where Jacob tells, oh my gosh, where am I forgetting Quinta Branson's character's name? Like in my head I still call her Quinta. But where Quinta Branson's character is told that, you know, she and Jacob are just work friends. So yeah. Anyway, but my work friend, who actually like we're friends, recommended Sassy to me, and I don't know, it finally convinced me to pick it up. So that's actually the latest book I've borrowed. So that's it for ebooks. Now, audiobooks. I have quite a number of audiobooks, and also quite a number of audiobooks whose like wait times, which have like waits on them. So, but then on the other hand, I listen. That's the word you're looking for, babes. I listen to audiobooks at 3x. So unless an audiobook is super long, it doesn't take me that long. So I found myself more and more borrowing books as audiobooks if I can, especially if my ebook stack is pretty high, or my physical stack is pretty high, just so that I can be able to get through a number of books. I mean, obviously I sound like I'm trying to like rack up 200 books by the end of the year. That's not really what's going on here, but it's like, it's nice to have something to listen to, and sometimes I also do that for parallel reads, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get into the list. So top of the list for audiobooks in terms of long waits, like long prospective waits if I don't finish them soon. The Netanyahus by Joshua Cohen, which I picked up because of the Pulitzer. TJ Parr has Something to Prove by Jasmine Cordero, and which I found out about from Twitter, I believe, and The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School by Sonores, which I also found out about. No, this was because of YouTube. Those three have 7 people waiting for them. So no way I'm not going to finish them because I don't know when I'm going to see them next. And I find, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but do you find that sometimes it's like hard to get back into a book if you had to send it back, either because you don't quite want to start from the beginning, but you also don't quite remember where you are? So 7 people is not a small list. Gotta finish them. 6 people waiting for The Swimmers by Julia Otsuka. You may recall that this was one of my anticipated reads, which I mentioned during the Media Book Freakout tag. 5 people waiting for The Scent of Burnt Flowers by Blitz Bazawole. I suspect I first heard about this from Twitter, but I'm not too sure. Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshizaku Kawaguchi and translated by Geoffrey Truslot has 4 people waiting for it, and I first heard about it from YouTube. I feel like it's one of those, you know, it's not going to demand much from me, which sometimes is just what you want from a book. Next is 3 people waiting for How We Show Up, Reclaiming Family, Friendship, and Community by Maya Birdsong. It's one of those, like those non-fiction books where I've been trying to explore some of these ideas around like community and these political ideas that underpin how we are in community with each other, because those are also the ideas that animate, say, mutual aid and things like those. Next, with 2 people waiting for it, is Things They Lost by Okwiri Odor. You might recall that that's a book I'm looking forward to reading, and I also got a copy earlier this year, a physical copy. My camera is actually sitting on top of that book, and I'm hoping to do parallel read, and then also my friend Wairimu, who I mentioned earlier, reviewed it for the Johannesburg Review of Books. I'll post the review downstairs, so I try to avoid reviews before I read a book. So a huge part of the reason I want to listen as I read is so that I can get through it fast. As I said, it's going to be 3x if I'm listening as I read. And then I can go and read all of the interviews and all of that stuff. And lastly, with one person waiting, Boundaries, When to Say Yes, How to Say No to Take Control of Your Life by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. Earlier this year, I read a book by Nedra Tayeb about boundaries, and I feel like I've been on a roll with such books. Just like, give me all the boundaries books, and yeah, it's had very interesting results, to be honest. So more library books, because even that Nedra Tayeb book was a book I picked up from the library, and I actually only borrowed it because a friend of mine had borrowed a copy for herself, and I was like, I think I mentioned this, that I share cards with quite a number of people because, you know, I live in a society, but also because I live in a society where there's practically no public library that would hook me up to Libby or something like that. So I see what my friends whose cards I share are borrowing, and sometimes it sparks ideas in me, and that's how that whole boundaries trip began. Then, in terms of audiobooks that don't have weights on them, so I could keep renewing them for a while, which is to say, like, it's fairly relaxed. First, Black Futures by Kimberly Drew and Jenna Wortham. I've followed both of them on Twitter for a while and just really interested in this book. It's been out for a while, so also that's a huge part of the reason why there isn't a hold. The Door by Magda Sabo and translated by Len Ricks. I'm not quite sure how I came upon this, but hey, it's Women in Translation Month. I'll post a link to more about that downstairs. So that's as good a reason as any to read this. Then Olga Dies Dreaming by Xochitl Gonzalez. I think I heard about this book from YouTube. It might also have been Twitter. What I know for a fact is that I really like the cover of this book, and, you know, aesthetics, we love them. Then Shaggy Bane by Douglas Stewart. I'm recording this on Wednesday the 27th, and the book long list was announced yesterday. So here I am, finally reading last year's winner. It was last year, right? Yeah. And considering that Young Mungo was not on the long list, which a few people had been anticipating, it takes off some of the pressure for me. As I was saying, I got interrupted. So, borrowing Shaggy Bane now. Shaggy Bane. Take some of the pressure off, especially now that Young Mungo is no longer on the list. Then, White Negroes When Cornrows Were in Vogue and Other Thoughts on Cultural Appropriation by Lauren Michelle Jackson. I first heard of this book on the Stacks podcast, which is a fantastic podcast. Like, if you only subscribe to one bookish podcast, that is the one. And I actually even found myself buying a book earlier this month. I will post it in the book haul when I finally do it, this month's book haul video. When you told me I'd become a book haul girly, if you told me I'd become a book haul girly, I would not have believed it, but it's going to be 3 months in a row. Anyway, and it sounded really interesting when it was being discussed, so I said, you know, going to have to borrow this, and I did, and it's quite short actually. So then My Heart by Semesdin Medinovic, which I mentioned earlier. I'm doing a parallel read, so I'm listening as I read, and that's going quite well. It's also quite short. Home/Land, a memoir of departure and return by Rebecca Mead. I think I first heard of it via the New York Times, or at least the first heard of Rebecca Mead via the New York Times. Not the New York Times, the New Yorker. But I'm not too sure, because it might have been a list. There's a running thing here, it might have been a list. Love by Mayan Aitan. I know for a fact I heard about this from CJ because she mentioned it in her latest video. And The Story of a New Name by Elena Ferrante, translated by Anne Goldstein, because I finally want to finish the series and it will require going past book 1. The Neapolitan novels, if you're wondering what series I'm talking about. 10 is The White Tiger by Aravind Adiga, which I'd been thinking about for a while, like Dawn. have we finished a video? We don't mention Don. Has read Aravinda Diga. I know for sure he's read The White Tiger and he liked it. And then my friend Angie was reading it at some point, and I saw it on a status of hers, and I was like, oh, I have this amongst my loans, because yes, I've read it a few times, and hopefully the next time I do this, which is in 3 weeks time, I will not be mentioning this particular book. And of these ones, the last is Black Joy, Stories of Resistance, Resilience and Restoration by Tracy Michael Lewis Gigetz, which I heard of because the author was on Therapy for Black Girls, which is a great podcast if you're interested in like psychology and basically how to move through the world, especially if you're a black femme, a black woman, a black person who, you know, is living in the world that is full of patriarchy and white supremacy and so on. Right, so that's all the books. Now, I know I didn't say this in the original video, but I am going to have a stats section. And by stats, I mean I'm only going to mention 3 things. I just realized right now that I could have talked about which libraries I got what at and how many things, for instance, and so on, or which libraries I got what at, inspired by Ray. But did I do that? No. Also, do I have 7 library cards? Am I keeping track of where things come from? Not particularly right now. So, but I'll try to do that for the next one. So the only stats I have with this are that 22% of the books I have borrowed currently are translated. 39% are nonfiction. Let me tell you, I do not consider myself a nonfiction reader, but the stats have it, 39%, and only 6% are books that are written by Africans. Wait, actually, that's not true. I'm going to change my math right now. 8% are books written by Africans or people who come from Africa. That's woefully low, honestly, considering I am an African reader. But on the flip side, I am borrowing a lot of these books from North American libraries, and so books from North America or Europe or even, you know, like not Africa will be overrepresented in this list. But that's something for me to think about. I've found that when I watch other people's stats videos or when posts share their stats about like what they've read that month and so on, it really helps you think. And technically I have a Google form which I use. I'll share a link below, which I need to update. But yeah, as I said, the statistics really, they put a handle on what you're doing. You know, it's one thing to have a narrative in your head about what your numbers look like and so on. It's another thing to see what they look like. Yeah, that's it. Please tell me what books you've borrowed right now that have the longest waits. I'd love to hear, and especially to know if you stand a good chance of finishing them before they have to be back at the library. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for subscribing if you subscribed. If you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button. Please like, share, comment, and all the good things. And I will see you soon. Bye.